Welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only show dedicated to the process and strategies for transforming apartment buildings to thriving communities. I am your host, John Brackett, and welcome to the show. All right, folks, welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only place where you come to learn how to take apartment buildings and turn them into amazing communities. So I am your host, John Brackett. Welcome to the show. I have here another great guest. And his name is Sensei Gilliland. Now, you heard me correctly, folks. It's Sensei. Sensei, not as the black belt, but Sensei as Sensei Gilliland, who also is going to show us some black belt techniques today on how to rehab properties. Now, this is kind of a unique conversation because, you know, this show is about apartment buildings, right? And everybody knows our purpose at this point. If you don't, let me say it. It's to build out great apartment communities and to improve how people live. Well, one of the ways that we do that is through rehabbing communities, right? To be able to improve them and, of course, command higher rents. But when we can improve properties, you have happier tenants and tenants that stay in there longer that ultimately turn into residents, right? That ultimately turn into residents who want to help boost and maintain a great community. So I thought that Sensei Gilliland would be a great host today because he's rehabbed and flipped over, I think, about 15,000 homes throughout the United States. And so it's going to be great to get into this conversation to learn what his process and systems are to be able to do this remotely, right? Because many of our listeners here and our audience, they're from all over the country, in many cases from different parts of the world. So I am a big believer in process and systems. That's the only way we're able to, at this point, purchase out of state and renovate, you know, properties, especially when they have quite a bit of deferred maintenance. So without further ado, Sensei Gilliland, welcome to the show, man.
Well, hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to educating some investors on your end.
Sounds good, buddy. So I got to ask, how did you get the name Sensei?
Yeah, so that's obviously a common question, right? But
I got to ask, right? I mean,
so people always ask, is that your real name? And the answer is yeah, basically yes and no. So here's the thing. My name's Sean, but I'm rarely called Sean. I've been in martial arts my whole life. And so when I was a young guy, I was always trailing my sensei, right? And at the age of 12, I was teaching the adult classes. At the age of 16, I was teaching law enforcement, disarmament, and hand-to-hand combat. And so a lot of people didn't know my name. And they go, oh, there goes little sensei. And just kind of caught on. My mom started calling him. My family started calling him. People in high school started calling me sensei. And it's just been a nickname more than a title. And so here I am today. And after that, I branded my real estate business after martial arts.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, I appreciate the explanation. I even asked the question. I go, man, is this your real name? And you're like, yeah, it is. Hey, well, I appreciate the explanation. So, hey, bud, share with us your story. Okay. You know, just to give you a sense for who our audience is, 40% are operators, right? Most of which are apartment building operators. Another 40% passive investors, experienced investing in different product types, predominantly at this point, apartment buildings. And then we have another 20% looking to get into this space, right? Here to learn, here to gain some knowledge and some wisdom from folks that are active right now in the marketplace, right? So I wanted to share that to give you some perspective. So if you could share your story, man, that'd be a great place to start. How in the world did you get into investing? And of course, the 15,000 flips and rehabs that you've been able to do throughout the nation. We're going to scale that down to apartment buildings and extrapolate some of your processes and strategies.
Sure.
Right. But I think it'd be a great conversation. So yeah,
absolutely.
Great.
Well, in a nutshell is this. Look, I started my very first martial arts school. I own a chain of martial arts schools in Los Angeles County. We're celebrating 33 years this year. So I started a school right after high school. Got out of high school, didn't want to work for anybody, went to college, full-time while I opened up my business, learned that I was making more money than my college professors. So I'm thinking, what the heck am I doing in college? So I got out of college and focused my efforts towards building my martial arts business. Martial arts, as most people know, is usually an after-school evening program for kids and adults. So I had my time during the day free, and I'm like, what am I going to do with my time? I got to figure something out here, because this is not the only thing I want to do with my life.
Right.
I'm here for a purpose. And what is that purpose? So I thought I was going to get into coin-op car washes. Easy business, 24/7. You hire a senior citizen to fill up the soaps and clean up the lot and, collect the tokens. And I'm basically just a cash register, right? Just cha-ching the whole time. But here's the problem. Although I understood the business format and I understood the process and what is required for the business, I didn't understand the real estate behind it. I didn't understand leasing. I didn't understand build a suit. I didn't understand zoning. I didn't understand anything. And so when I started diving into understanding how I'm going to put this car wash on a piece of property, I learned this one key thing, that real estate controls all business. And so with that, I decided, what am I going to do in the coin-op car business? I need to be the landlord to this piece of property. So then I took a right turn and started diving more into real estate. And that's where I started my real estate career. With that, I fixed and flipped my very first property that was in Fort Myers, Florida. I bought a approved probate. I fixed it up, and I was hoping and praying that it was getting done, because back in 1995, I had a lot going on that year. I got engaged to my fiance. We moved in with each other. We got married. We had a baby. I bought my very first home. I fixed it up because it was a textbook property. It was a short sale. It was an out-of-state owner. She was an alcoholic. Husband passed away. I got a good deal. Increased that value, and then did a cash out refinance and bought my very first fix and flip property over in Fort Myers, Florida. So it's kind of a lot in 1 year, but that's just how I roll, basically. With that, buying that property, I exhausted all my funds. It all went into that property. And I'm back home hoping and praying that the job is getting done properly. And I would get an update every once in a while. They give me a phone call. Okay. And then they send me a Polaroid in the mail every once in a while. Remember, we didn't have the internet back then like we have it today. Right. So they said, we'll have this thing fixed up and resold for you within 6 months. 7 months go by, 8 months go by, 9 months go by. I'm sweating. I didn't even see a finished product. I didn't have any credit left on my credit card to go check it out. But to my surprise, I received a FedEx envelope, ripped it open, and I pulled out a check with a little over $9,000 net profits from flipping my first property. And that 1,000 pounds on my back went away. I started thinking about it. I was remote, California to Florida, from coast to coast. I literally made a little over $1,000 a month in passive income. I'm like, dang, I got to do this again. I treated real estate just like I treat a can of Pringles. Once you pop, you can't stop. So I went back out there and started picking up more properties. Buying properties, super inexpensive because I couldn't afford to buy in California.
Sure.
Moved my way through Florida to Georgia to Texas to Arizona to California in the later 90s and started flipping condos here.
Interesting, man. I really appreciate you walking us through that little timeline there. That's pretty cool. Congratulations to you, by the way. Because it's one thing to want to do something, it's another to actually do it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And then scale it, right? I mean, those are things that you have to combination of willingness, courage, and then having the savvy to put it all together to scale. So
that's where my background in martial arts comes in. It's all about focus and discipline and being relentless towards your goal.
Yeah.
You just mentioned, it's one thing of doing and wishing. I tell people all the time, I wish my lawn would get mowed, but it's never going to happen until I get out there and push the lawnmower. Well, to be honest, that's not going to happen because I don't have a callus in my hand until I pay someone to get out there and push the lawnmower, right? But you have to take action to do it because too many people wish they can get out of their W-2 job and live the dream of being self-employed or get out there and enjoy the freedoms that entrepreneurs have. But they can't get out of the W-2 mindset, and they wish and they hope. And I can tell you right now, that is not
a great point.
Action.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. I had someone ask me, wanted to intern with us, and I told them right now we just are not able to do that. Right, with everything going on, and we have a bunch of different projects. And I said, you know what, not right now. We're just not taking on any more interns right now in this market. We might do that next year, the beginning of the year, January, February. I'll reach out to you, right? But he was asking some really good questions, but he said, hey, what is one thing I can do today? I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to have my own business. I want to get into real estate. What can I start doing today to prepare myself? And I said, go run a couple marathons. And he looked at me and he laughed. And I don't think he understood what I was trying to say. And the point there being is, man, if you read every single biography out there about people that do tremendous things, from Bill Gates to what's the guy that passed that started Apple? What's his name? The Apple guy.
It's Jobs. They go through a ton of adversity, right? Yep.
And they find ways, and we all do, to overcome adversity and to be resilient, right? To keep moving forward. And I think one of the things that is not talked about enough with people is, you don't necessarily have to know everything. In fact, it's almost better that you don't. Mm-hmm. But if you simply accept the fact and you make it your reality that you'll figure it out and find a way, you're just 90% there, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of replicating that story over and over again, depending on what situation you come into. And so, I told him, I said, yeah, look, go run a couple of marathons. And when you're done with that, if you still feel the grit inside of you to move forward with a business, because that's what it's going to feel like when you come up against obstacles, right? You have to be willing to run another one, right? And when you're done with that, you have to be willing to run another one. I said, look, man, if you run your first one and you're still feeling like you're ready to run another one, because that's what it's going to feel like when you run into your first big obstacle, then yeah, man, you're ready to be an entrepreneur and, move forward. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's something that's not talked about much. So with that being said, let's pivot a little bit. Okay. And let's start talking about construction, because construction, I think, is a skill that we can map over to our audience, right? Because inside of our business, when we're looking at value-add real estate, one of the big components to that is, of course, finding properties with deferred maintenance and adding value, right? Whether it be on the rehab side or some other component to the property. So talk to us a little bit about, some of the systems that you use to be able to manage construction remotely.
Yeah. So I've got an arm to Black Belt investors called remoterehabs.com, and I also own remoterentals.com. And so we've had that for over 20 years now. It's not as easy as people think it to be. They think, I'm going to replicate Black Belt investors. I'm going to run out there and find a property. All I got to do is find a good deal, and then I'm going to go find a contractor, and they'll rehab it, and I'll be over here kicking back on my hammock like the infomercials show me that I can do, right? So that would be great in a perfect world. We know that's not going to happen, because I know that you build apartments, you know that I rehab properties, and even though as savvy as we are today, we still get ripped off by people. At least I do, right? Our job is to mitigate that risk or mitigate that loss. And so for me, I've been in several different markets across the states, and I'm always in different markets, and I move around from market to market, and I find these markets before they become an emerging market. And with that, I study the markets. And when I study the markets and I choose a market, then I learn everything that I can about that market. That could be anywhere from topography to builders to people that are in the building department, the government, the local government, I should say, all the ins and outs. So I have a really good knowledge base about that market. Once I've learned it, then I train someone to be my shadow, and I put them out in that market as a project manager. Now, I do that because we do volume. I kind of model myself after Costco, one of my favorite places. We move quality products in bulk at good prices. And so with that, I got a couple project managers in each location that's able to oversee those contractors, those inspectors, those property managers, so that they can report back to me. And then with that, we use, software programs in order to communicate back and forth, in order to let us know where we're at in certain progress of projects, which helps quite a bit. Now, with my team here, I've got virtual assistants that work for Black Belt investors. I'm not talking about hiring them through what's it? Not Odesk, Upwork. I'm not talking about like Upwork and in the Philippines. I'm talking about I've got full-time employees of Black Belt investors, and these guys, I've got 2 over in Florida. I've got one in Arizona. I've got a couple over in Cleveland, 1 in Texas, and then I've got an office of 7 of us here that work full-time. And so we're always communicating, but the cool thing is that we're able to flip properties virtually, which is awesome for us.
Sure. Okay. So let's unpack some of that. Okay. So I'm gonna start by talking a little bit about just maybe the construction process to engage our audience in this conversation a little bit more. So, we start by acquiring a property, we find a great deal, right? Mm-hmm. We take it down, we acquire it, we add great financing to it, right? Now we take it down. Now we have to start going through our business plan and adding value to the property, so that we can command greater rents. All right. So let's start off with the vetting process. Okay. Actually, no, let's start off with how do you scope out a project? So when you're going through due diligence, okay, how do you go out and scope a project, right? So that you start putting together a scope of work and you start, getting some understanding of what your rehab cost, your renovation cost is going to be. Okay. And obviously you're usually doing this before you purchase the property, but let's just start here so that we can make this a conversation around construction, rehab process, et cetera.
Sure. So again, like I said earlier, understanding the market is going to be most important, because what you're asking is for value add in a property. Right. And that value add may be an improvement, it may be an addition. We have to understand what the local mentality and what people are wanting in that certain market, because what they want in San Diego may be different of what they want over in Toledo, Ohio.
Agreed.
And that's material costs. What they build a home over in Toledo may be different what they do over here, because they don't use a lot of stucco over there, right? So we have to understand what type of structure we're getting into, what type of mentality of what the buyer is going to want in that property. So I think understanding the marketplace in regards to real estate and your prospect that you're going to be selling to is going to be the utmost importance. Now, if I'm reviewing, if my acquisitionists are here in Southern California, so if we're reviewing properties, we're at this point doing everything online, because we market to off-market properties. We are finding these distressed properties, these distressed sellers. We work with a few small community banks that offload properties, allow us to cherry pick their REOs. We buy properties at the auction. We buy tax liens. We foreclose on them. We acquire properties that way. I mean, there's a lot of different ways we get there, but they're all off market.
Right.
So a lot of these properties have not been active in a very long time. What I mean by that, they haven't been occupied. So they're going to need work. I've never bought a property at an auction that has been 100% turnkey. They all need some sort of work. So with that, there may be properties that have not had utilities on the last 7 years. So we can only do so much work at that point, right? Online. We can take a look at the street views. We can understand the comparable sales. We can chat it up with local real estate agents and brokers and appraisers to get an understanding of values. But what we really need to do is start combing through that property to figure out, gosh, is the roof okay? Do we have another 10 years left on it? Or do we have to add a layer? Or is it a complete tear off and then put a new one on? Because there's going to be a price difference on that, right? The electrical, we run into a lot of knob and tubing in certain markets. So we got knob and tubing, and then we got electrical panels that work with plugs versus breakers. So do we update those? Because there's going to be a value difference in doing so, and there's going to be a cost difference in doing so. And so having project managers on the ground are great, because if you send out a contractor, even if you have a good relationship with, what's their number one thing they want to do? They want to rack up the items of repairs to rack up their bills so they can get a good, healthy job payday. But I don't want to rehab a property and fix something that doesn't need to be fixed because it's in great shape. So my project manager will walk through the property, as if they're a home inspector. They will have a list. They'll check off the list and let us know what's going on. They're typically walking with the contractor. And if it's a property that I'm going to buy, whether it's through the bank or distressed seller, I will go ahead and get a home inspection on that property, completely independent. Now, if the utilities don't work, whatever, I don't care. I just want them to go because they're the guys that are going to go into the basement or crawl under the space or go in the attic where my project manager says he'll do it, but he doesn't do it, or the contractor will just kind of eyeball something.
Sure.
Now I can take that home inspection plus my project manager's notes plus my contractor notes, consolidate them, and then figure out what I want to do to the property and use it as a punch list.
Okay, cool. So for your project manager, let's start there. Okay. Do you have a standardized checklist that person uses to walk your properties? Like for me, we have that even till today, and out of habit from doing this so long, I always walk a property starting with my right? So if I'm facing the door, I always had a habit at this point, go to my right. It's just a habit.
Okay.
Just a habit, right? And I go through my checklist that way. Do you guys have a standardized checklist that you use for these properties when you're trying to make a decision as to whether or not you're going to buy it, and of course, what the CapEx requirements are going to be for the property, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So my habit when I walk into a property is always to look down and then work my way up. I don't care if I go left or right. And that's because I learned, I bought a side note here. I bought a cabin for myself up on the ski resort in Big Bear and didn't have utilities. The guy was living there with no utilities. And he says, yeah, go ahead and go inside. You can walk it. Just don't let the cat out. No problem. Come to find out they had 13 cats in there and they never let the cats out. And so I was walking into landmines. And since then, I've always looked down and worked my eyes up.
Interesting.
But the answer is yes. We work with that way because we're doing multiple properties. If I think I'm going to keep it all up here, I'm wrong. I'm going to forget. And if I'm on vacation, which I just got back last week from a 5-week road trip, or if I'm ill, there was a time back in 2015, I was laid up in bed for 3 months, didn't know what was going to happen with me. The point I'm trying to make is that checklist or those sheets that we use, someone else can pick up the ball and run with it. Right. When I'm not here or when my other acquisition is not here. So checklist is important, number one, for that reason. Number two, to keep my contractors accountable. Because a contractor will say, well, gosh, you never told me about that. And I'm like, here it is. It's right here in the sheet. And so it keeps them accountable. 3 is liability. If anything ever comes back to me, I'll have that sheet in hand and I'll discuss with my buyer at that time saying, nope, this was not on our scope of work. You got the scope of work. We're not responsible for that, or we are responsible for that.
Okay, cool, man. I really appreciate you sharing that. So just to recap, right? So one of the advantages of having a standardized process, which is really important, is one, it creates efficiency, right? 2, it prevents mistakes.
Yep.
Right. And then 3, it allows you to start making some judgments around cost. Because inside of our templates that we use, we adjust cost usually every 6 months within those templates. And the idea is to be efficient when we're walking a property, right? To be efficient with and realistic with what some of the potential issues are, to add a preliminary cost to them, right? So that we can take that back and then look at our metrics for underwriting and have some sense as to whether or not the deal still works after the physical inspection. Okay. So now that we've talked a little bit about the physical inspection, okay, you bring up a really good point. So we've done a little pre-walk or a walkthrough. And then your comment was, hey, John, okay, what we do after we do that is we actually order some inspections, which is really common, right? In our world, it's a property condition report. There may be some environmental requirements, but property condition report, home inspection, fairly similar. There's some nuances in that. One, you may have an engineer doing that, so they may make some comments a little differently, and then they may add some cost categories to that. With the home inspection, same thing, right? They're pointing out items, and after you do about 300 of those type of flips, you get to be pretty good at estimating cost.
Absolutely.
Some of those line items. Okay. So with that being said, your comment was, okay, John, hey, we use our checklist first. We get some preliminary idea of cost and scope. And then what we want to do is we want to get an independent person out there helping us really understand what the condition is, cost, and then mapping that up to what we've created internally. Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely. And, we know what our budget is for the project. And so having that home inspection, I'll give you an example, because this just happened to a property with us over in Indianapolis at the beginning of summer. I had a project manager walk through it. I had a contractor walk through it. It didn't have utilities, so a little dark inside, even though it was daylight, but they were in the basement. Now, I went ahead and moved forward with purchasing the property. But during that time, I also sent out a home inspector to basically dot their I's and cross their T's. And then sometimes it's the other way around. So I think the more eyes and legs you have at that property, the less money you're going to end up losing somewhere. Okay. And so I'm just really trying to, as a Navy SEAL, I'm not shooting with a shotgun and getting this broad approach. I want this type grouping going on. Well, that home inspector ended up finding that one of the basement walls was bowing inward due to water intrusion that the other guys didn't see because it was too dark.
Interesting.
And so by that now, I can make a better decision whether I'm going to stay with that property or not, because I know the cost on that to put carbon fiber straps and get everything going on it, and then waterproofing that basement. And do I have the budget for it? So now I truly know the expense, and I can make a sound decision whether I'm going to walk, renegotiate, or take on the project.
Okay, great. So now let's talk about the contractors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you bring in your contractors, and so walk us through your process there. What does the conversation look like? How do you vet them? Well, maybe start with, especially when you're in different states and you haven't been in. I mean, I have our strategies for doing this, but let's talk about you're in a new state, right? You haven't done much business in that state. So walk us through how you identify very good contractors, right?
Sure.
And then vet them out and, of course, make a decision and then walk the property with them.
Right. Well, to me, contractors and property management can be your best friend or your worst enemy.
Agreed.
They're either going to save you money or they're going to rake you over the coals or cost you money somewhere. So to answer your question in regards to vetting, one of the most simple things that we can do is go down to the building department of the city. Most, not all, but most building departments will not recommend a contractor, but they will have a list of approved contractors that are licensed in that city. That's a good start. Okay. Then I'll talk to the city inspector or code enforcement and ask if they've ever worked. And hey, I see that you got a list here. Have you ever worked with it? Yeah, I've worked with it. Who's good at communication? Because if I ask who's good or cheap or who's expensive, they won't say that.
Hey, man, that's actually a really great point. That's a great point. That's really good. That's a nugget right there.
Which one?
So you're right. When you go to a city, no one's going to say, because the conflict of interest, right? And they're legally not able to do that.
Yep.
Hey, who do you like?
Yep.
But around communication and things that don't create that conflict, that's really great. That's great.
Well, I think we all know that communication is key, and for me, I'm pretty anal with that. I'm not on people's backs or asking for a lot, but just communicate with me. So that's one way we do it, and then we back that up by, let's just say, we find our local national RIA in the area. That's a Real Estate Investment Association, and we'll hit them up. Which contractors do you like? And then we'll, make a decision. And then at that point, we'll contact those contractors. And then I kind of run them through the mill of what does it cost per square on a roof to replace? What do you charge a square yard for carpet? Little simple things like that, because I already know what those numbers are. I know what I will pay that will give them profit, but also leave me profits as well. And we start talking. Now everybody says, okay, one of the most famous things that people are told or they read on a blog is to verify their work. Yes, that's important. Check them online to see if there's any lawsuits against them or if their license is in any sort of jeopardy. That's important as well. I will use contractors for certain types of work. I will use handymen for other types of work. and that will help with costs as well. So just getting out there, and when I'm out in the field, I'm walking with these contractors, and we go from house to house to house to build that rapport, ask the questions that are needed so that you have an understanding of cost and labor, but not only that, their process. Are they going to start the job on Monday, be there on Tuesday, and then go start another job and come back to you on Monday or Tuesday? Right. Or are they going to start the job with you and work all the way through until complete? I'm personally looking for a contractor that can handle multiple jobs at one time. And I never rely on one contractor. I've done that before, and I've lost a ton of money because, like I said earlier, we will lose money. And so I've had contractors take their first draw and run, and then I'm stuck with no contractor to pick up the ball. So I have multiple contractors, and I find that these contractors will keep each other in check as well.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I appreciate that. So something that I'll share with the audience is one of the things that I do when we're in a new market is once I get a sense for what the scope looks like and I have an idea of what trades we need to hire in, some of the work we'll self-perform, right? We'll perform ourselves. Some we'll source it out. But depending on the trade, and so I'll start with foundation, right? We'll go foundation up. So foundation, plumbing, structural, we'll look at electrical, roof, and then depending on the state, HVAC, really important, right? If you're in a southern state, HVAC man can either make your building or break it. Mm-hmm. But we'll look at trades, and I'll look at a trade, and then we'll reach out to distributors for that trade, right? So if it's, for example, HVAC, I'll find the top 3 distributors in whatever that city is, or that submarket, and ask for their top 3 people. Always get it that way. Same thing with roofing. Right? Same thing with roofing. In fact, that's how we found, some of our best roofers in various states. Same thing with foundation folks, right? Actually, the foundation folks, the best foundation folks have come from the cities for us. Okay. Right? But the logic is the same, right? The logic is the same as break things up by trade. Go find companies that sell that product specifically. So a roofing company that does predominantly roofing, go there, ask for their top 3 guys, and then we always have a lot of success doing that because they're proven, especially folks that have been there buying product from them for 15 years, right? And they're still buying. I always ask them, well, are they busy? Are they buying from you still? And they say, yes. Okay, great. Then, I schedule a time to meet with them. I always ask them about, folks that are bringing a lot of things back, right? That are having a lot of problems. Do they have a lot of returns with your product? They go, oh man, no, these guys are really good. They're great installers. So the point there being is we've had a lot of success breaking things down by trade, especially in markets where we have to start finding people and we don't have a lot of understanding of the market area yet or people in the market. That for us, man, has been golden. I mean, we've had a lot of success around that.
Well, to spin off that a little bit, one of the things that we do to be cost effective, we do exactly what you've mentioned. But when it comes to materials, you mentioned HVACs, roofing materials, not so much. But if we're putting in granite, we're known for bringing granite in from China and storing it in our, in a self-storage or a warehouse, or buying carpet and rolls and just paying for the labor to do that. And so the other way we love to find contractors is through home inspectors, because these guys tend to work with same contractors or run into the same contractors over and over again, and who's doing good work and who's not doing good work. And I think a lot of investors, whether they're in the residential field or the commercial field, when they're starting out, they just want to go cheap, and cheap is not always the best way to go. Right. It's great to be cost effective. I keep saying cost effective versus cheap, because you don't want to go put in an HVAC system, or you don't want to go put in a new roof and the roofer's not around 2 years from now and you got a leak, especially if you want to build integrity as a business to your potential clients and your existing clients. Because one thing that I find in real estate is that many people jump on the bandwagon when it's good, but when a recession hits or a pandemic hits, poof, they vanish.
Yeah, I mean, that's common.
And we haven't, right? We haven't. I mean, we've gone through 3 recessions already and now a pandemic. And it's important that whether it's a provider like myself or you, or it's a vendor, that they have been able to weather the storms throughout the years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why that approach has worked for us really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I always like, this is going to sound counterintuitive, right? But, yes, everyone says, hey, reach out to other investors and ask them for referrals. In new markets, that hasn't produced the best results for us because
costly.
you're never getting the best people, right? It just hasn't produced the best results for us. But I always like finding folks that I think fit for us based on what their results are. And I think the best way to do that is to go seek out manufacturers that they're buying from, that they're dependent on for their livelihood, right? Yeah. Cement companies are a great way also, to find some really, really good skilled tradesmen. Same thing with hardscape companies, folks selling hardscape. That's worked for us really well. And man, here's the thing. When you're building a list off of people that are moving through various market cycles and they're their busiest folks, that's a great place to start, right?
Yeah.
That's a great place to start. So for us, that's worked really well. Those contractors have produced great for us, and we've been able to build some really good relationships. So I really
wait a minute. That tells me you're not going through Craigslist to find your contractors?
No, man. No, not when we actually have to do real work. Not when we actually have to do real work, right? But the point there being is the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you, it's about learning how to be mobile, right? Learning how to be flexible. You bring up a Navy SEAL. Now, I am not a Navy SEAL, so I don't want to pretend like I can relate to these guys because they do some pretty cool stuff. And have a lot of respect for them because of the freedoms that they provide us in this country. But I understand the logic, right? It's being very intentional and specific about how we plan out a move, how we plan for battle.
That's right.
And so for that, man, I think that was a really great analogy. And then the idea is how to be mobile, right? How to put yourself in a position where it doesn't matter what market you go into, you have a process, right? For being able to build a construction team, a great construction team, really quickly that's very competitive. And that, I think, man, is an art that you have to learn how to nail down to a science. And that's been something that's really helped us over the years.
But that's also the Navy SEAL. They adapt. Right?
You got to be adaptable. Yeah.
Land, air. They adapt, right? So we have to adapt like a Navy SEAL, no matter which market we're in or real estate cycle that we're in, because we can profit in just about every market and every real estate cycle.
Yeah, for sure. I have a buddy of mine, Brian Upchurch, really neat guy, man, special operator who is now full-time real estate investor, right? Predominantly focused on apartment buildings. Started with single family, scaled up to apartment buildings, doing really, really well. And, one of the things that he told me, man, that I found really fascinating is this guy is great at recon, right? I mean, that's one of his, what did he call it? It's one of his superpowers. Now, He didn't quite say it that way, but in talking to him, man, he shared some great tips, some of the things that I'm talking to you about right now. Mm-hmm. So for the audience on the show, go back and look at his show. His name is Brian Upchurch. And man, the guy is a master at recon. So you can tell that was a skill set that he had while being a special operator that completely transferred over, right?
Yeah.
When he gets into a market, man, he can recon the hell out of a market with intelligence, and the guy is amazing. So to your point about being adaptable and flexible, all right? So we're approaching the end of our show, but I'm gonna pivot a little bit and then conclude this conversation or summarize this with putting together timelines for construction. Okay. Because that's a really, really big one, right? If you don't have a timeline, very difficult to set expectations, very difficult to prioritize your trades. Everybody's tripping over each other depending on how big the project is. And very difficult to get things done on time if you're not putting together timelines and also scheduling in your trades properly, right? Keeping people accountable to a schedule. So Talk a little bit about how you folks do that and maybe some of the key takeaways.
Yeah, so we use a project management software that we can all communicate with, and that's important because there's a time difference. I'm on the West Coast. A lot of my properties are in the Midwest or on the East Side, which are 3 hours ahead of us, and so it's important that we all communicate through our property management software, so that way we can keep little notes and know where to pick up the ball as they start to close out the day, and we're in the midday here. That's really important to us. If we didn't have that, we'd probably just fall apart with the volume of properties that we're doing right now.
What is the software that you use? What software?
We use FreedCamp.
FreedCamp. I've never heard of that.
And I'll tell you what, we use the free version. So that's all we need. We don't need all the bells and whistles.
FreedCamp.
Yeah, FreedCamp. It's we were using Pipedrive years and years ago.
I've heard of Pipedrive.
And then we moved over to FreedCamp, and I used to own a marketing company. That's why I used to own a marketing company, and the marketing company was using FreeCamp. I'm like, this is kind of cool. It's very simple. I can train someone that's hired minimum wage to do it, and so we just went from there and just started using FreeCamp about maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Interesting, man. Interesting.
Use a free version.
Systems are really important. Now, when you're using that, are you able to build out timelines on there or a construction schedule, or is it mostly for communication around?
Yeah, it's mostly through communication around our projects. I believe if you go to the paid version, you can do that. You can start putting timelines and schedules and things like that. With us, we will communicate the timeline within our communication in our software, and then we'll also use it. We use Outlook Calendar for all of our appointments. What is it? Microsoft 360. So it's live. It's not live. It's what's the word I'm looking for? Real time everywhere.
Sure.
So we got a lot of people that are either using their mobile phones or tablets or computers, popping in appointments and things like that. That's important. So we got a good communication system that way. We can also, we do a lot of video, which we upload, and you can upload into FreeCamp or, like a YouTube. We use a paid Vimeo page where we upload a lot of video for projects and things like that, so we can review and walk through with our project manager or contractor in that arena as well.
Yeah, man, you said two things that really stood out that I've learned to be really important for us. We use Excel spreadsheets. I custom create all of those and then roll them out to my team, but simple Gantt charts, right? But the idea is to keep everything really, really simple and to make sure that we can clearly identify and break up all of our trades and have very specific timelines to those trades. Yeah. Color code things, right? So people know start, stop times. And then here was a big one that I've learned over the years: print that stuff out, get everybody together. Mm-hmm. Okay. And sometimes you can't get everyone together, getting all the trades together at the same time, not realistic, but really important to pass out, right? That timeline to each trade person, have a conversation with them to know exactly where they are in the schedule, because they need to really understand that if they don't show up on time, right, they push everybody else back.
Absolutely.
Right? Whoever doesn't finish on time, on schedule, pushes everybody else back along with their paychecks. Yeah. And I just need to make it really clear to people that, hey, look, this is who you're impacting. So we need to start, finish on time, work together as a team. Because in construction, man, nothing's perfect, right?
No.
Nothing is perfect. And, being able to manage through that really starts with a timeline, being very effective at getting people to buy into that timeline and then holding people accountable to the timeline, right? That's really, really important.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I do well, is holding people accountable. The timeline is, listen, when I first started rehabbing myself, I was the GC. I was wearing all the hats. I would subcontract everybody out so that way I don't have to pay the middleman, because I didn't have the money back in the day. Right. And I would overview everything, and I would, doing all the work. But, then I learned as I started getting older, time is much more valuable than money. And so I spend that little extra money to make sure that I have project managers. And that project manager is not only just to walk through properties, but their job is also to help us save money and keep our contractors accountable. And if they're not, if the contractor is lacking, then it's their job to, communicate with that contractor, and the contractor is slipping, hey, we immediately replace them like that. And I say contractor because I don't like to sub out a lot of jobs. I don't like to sub out a lot of tasks on one project. Now, it's different when you're doing apartments because it's a much more grand scale projects, versus a house, right? It's much easier to hire a contractor that will sub out the work and let him deal with his own subcontractors, and my project manager work with that contractor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does.
So it consolidates everything, and our timelines are met a little bit easier versus trying to subcontract everything out. And usually when people are subcontracting everything out, they're just trying to save some money and stay in the budget. And I get it.
Yeah.
But it's
we don't do that to save money. We actually do that to speed up time, and also to make sure that we're getting the right tradesman on that specific task, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That's the reason why we started doing that over the course of a couple of years now. But then we also have a couple of tradesmen that can do multiple trades. So if it's a smaller project, right, we'll bring someone in who can do multiple tradesmen, and that's huge. I've done that before on some apartment buildings where I knew I could bring someone in who really understood plumbing, electrical, and then what did this require, and finish work, right? Yeah. 2 people essentially could do that trade. And then I found someone local in the community who could install HVACs, and that was a very difficult install, quite tight quarters. There was no way I would have been able to do that type of install in the speed and the time that we did if I had to go out and look for people in that marketplace that I've never done business with before, except for the HVAC person. And he was willing to do the install and then me bill him later, which was really cool. And it was a really, pretty decent install, right? And pretty big size install. So that's why we do it. I think as the projects get a little bit larger and sometimes a little bit more intricate, and depending on the state, I'll give you an example. In Texas, for example, man, you don't need to be licensed to be a general contractor. So you can imagine the challenge that could create, right? Everybody's a general contractor out there, but not everyone has the same skill level.
Right.
So oftentimes we have to bypass any GC if we want to make sure that the work is done properly by a specific trade, right?
Right.
So the trades that require licensing, right, in Texas, in states like that, where, you don't have a licensed contractor, it's not required, man, I always go direct to the skilled tradesman for electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. Those are
foundation.
Critical. Yeah. And foundation. I mean, that's a requirement, right? With engineering, that stuff usually has to get engineered first. But really the message that I'm trying to convey is, states have different requirements. They do, especially with trades people, and really understanding what the licensing requirements are first, and then backing into that, man, has saved us several, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, because initially I've made some mistakes. I've had a couple of really expensive seminars not doing that first. And so this is all learning from experience, right? On, okay, that was a mistake. Let me learn from that. Now make some adjustments. So
I'm so glad you brought that up, because a lot of people, if you live in a state that requires you to truly study and test to be a GC,
right,
then you would just assume that other states do the same.
And it's not, man.
And it's not. So, like, for instance, I do a lot of work right now in the Cleveland, Ohio market. The only thing required to become a GC is just pay for the license. That's it.
That's it. That's
so
your GC license.
I've got a gal right now out of Canada that bought a property over in Cleveland, not from me, have no idea who she, what her plans are doing and how she got the property, but she bought a property, and then you got a lot of people advertising that they're a general contractor, that they can do the work. Hired this general contractor. She's into it for $30,000 and did about maybe $12,000 worth of work and took off with the rest.
Right. And man, that's very common out of state.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah,
it happens many all the time.
Because a general contractor in one state means something very different than in another state, right?
That's right.
Very, very different. So, hey, bud, we are at the end of our show, man. You've been a tremendous guest. I want to thank you for being on. This has been a really cool conversation, right? Because, the idea is how to stay nimble and flexible especially when you're looking to scale and you have to go out of state to do that. Or maybe you go out of state to do that because it's more in line with your model, right? Or you're looking to move into other states. But the idea with construction, huge value opportunity if you understand how to manage construction, but you can do it remotely and out of state. And so I think this has been a great show because there have been a lot of little nuggets that you've been able to provide on this show, but you did it in sequence, man, that will allow people to actually implement and execute, right? So if you were to play this show back, 2 times, there's a sequence in what you communicated, and a lot of that, 85% of that is implementable.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it's not the most sexy topic, is it?
No, it's not.
It's just not. But
a topic that'll make you a lot of money.
Most people want to talk about, cash on cash return and all this other foo-foo stuff. But it's this that where most people have the issues. It's this of knowing how to run a business and having employees or independent contractors and vendors and how to get to the right source. Where most people just throw their hands up in the air and say, I'll never do this again. It's nothing but a headache. But you nailed it on the head.
If you think about what you said, man, this is where most of the opportunity is, right? So outside of your purchase price, and that's why I don't always agree with, you make money on the purchase, right? I agree with that, but it also depends on why you're buying it at that price, okay? So most, people don't always talk about that. But anyways, the point there being is with construction, there's huge opportunity where there's complexity. And the reason why there's so much opportunity in construction is because there's complexity, right? You're dealing with many different types of trades, different personalities, okay? Different people, different characters, right? There's complexity in that. You're dealing with different income requirements, right? Or fee requirements for that trade, right? You're just dealing with a lot of different complexity. And everyone else listening and watching, our ability to be able to solve those problems will give you an advantage. And so that's why I think, man, this is a huge opportunity for people in this industry, but it's under discussed because not very many people play in this space, right?
Yeah.
Who live in this space.
Circumstance creates cash.
Yes, okay? It does, man. It does.
Circumstance creates cash, and sometimes you might not get the best deal, but when you're working on the construction side of it, there's ways that you can manipulate, and whether it's value add or crunching some numbers or something else, where you can create more space or more equity for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I really appreciate being on, man. Thank you so much. Before we ask our audience, or before I ask you to share how people get in touch with you, what's one question that you have for me that you think can add some value to our audience?
A question that I can ask, what's your favorite superhero?
Green Lantern, man. When I was a kid, Green Lantern was my favorite superhero.
Why?
Man, he was just cool. And, he had his ring, right? So his ring, he could just... he could do some really cool stuff with his ring. He could elevate, he can blow things up, he can make people disappear, he could fly with it. And it was all from a ring, man. And he just had a cool costume.
Second question is, where's your ring? I don't see it on your right hand.
Oh, this is it right here, man. This is it right here. This ring never leaves my hand. I've been married for 22 years. This thing doesn't leave my hand.
All right. So what you're basically saying, 22 years?
22 years.
Oh, congrats, man. You
Thanks,
just hit 25. So what you're saying about the Green Lantern is that not only is he super cool, but he can make something out of nothing. He can make the impossible possible, right?
Yeah,
with that.
He was definitely my favorite superhero. That's why that one came so quick. And yeah, he was cool, man. He was cool.
So when you're going after apartments, commercial building, or residential real estate, be the Green Lantern of real estate.
Man, I love that. In fact, I love that, man. I love that. I'm going to use that, and I will. So now I'm never going to be able to get that out of my head, right? Every time I walk an apartment building, I'm going to be freaking thinking Green Lantern.
You are going to go right and be the Green Lantern.
Now I'm going to go buy a ring with a little green stone in there. Right?
There you go.
Well, hey, man, I really appreciate you. You've been a great guest.
It's been fun.
Tremendous conversation. How do people get in touch with you? What's the best way for people to find you?
That's easy. Just go to blackbeltinvestors.com. That's plural, blackbeltinvestors.com, or remoterehabs.com, or you can simply call us at 951-280-9700. 1900. Let me ask you, John, does your audience like free things?
Man, everybody loves something free.
I know. I see them at Costco all the time standing in line for a cracker. But hey, if it's okay with you, if they're interested and they go over to you and say, hey, I've heard the podcast, we'd be more than happy to send them a calculator on how to measure their expenses and income on fix and flip property.
Sweet, man. That's a great offer. I appreciate that. Well, hey, bud, I want to wish you continued success. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, John.
And keep crushing it, buddy.
My pleasure.
Clarity of purpose creates our greatest competitive advantage. When we transform apartment buildings to thriving communities, we improve how people live and create assets with high profit margins. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this up with a friend. I'm John Brackett, bringing you things you can implement right away.